EPL, talk about a little bit of the coaching carousel happening right now in the Premier League. So, four faces on the screen, all rumored in and out of jobs over the last few weeks slash months, between Gary O'Neill at Wolves. At times, we've heard about pressure mounting on Eddie Howe at Newcastle, though I think that has more to do with like the papers wanting to write articles about Newcastle for some reason than it really is Eddie Howe being up for a move. Everton's up and down struggles with Sean Dyche, and of course, the inevitable firing that was Russell Martin being a Premier League manager, coaching a championship team, playing as if they're Pep Guardiola's side, playing out from the back. So obviously, we wake up this morning with news basically that I think actually the first news broke Sunday morning that Gary O'Neill was out. And then, of course, this morning that Russell Martin was out, though I would argue, I'm pretty sure the people at Southampton decided to fire him when it was 5-0 after 11 minutes in the Tottenham match. Let's start with Gary O'Neill, because I think we talked a lot about that on our pod. So Wolves in itself, is this a Gary O'Neill problem? Is this a Wolves problem? Like, where does Wolves go from here?
It's a bit of both, probably. I actually listened to, I think it just showed up as like a short or a reel or whatever it was, one of these social media things. And it was Gary O'Neill's, I think it was like post-match or something like that. And he talked about, and it's like a minute long or so. And I know exactly what he's saying. Like, he made a good case of why things are shitty right now. And that's what, that it was not going to be easy this year. And he talked about a lot about, like, whether it's injuries or the fact that they sold like 100 million worth of people. So, and did not replace him. So he makes a good case, right? And I was actually in this morning show, I was talking to Matish about this as a, Liverpool fan, or like a, couldn't care less about, what's going on at Wolves or whatever. I listened to that as a neutral, and I'm like, I hear you, man. I know where you're coming from. But I don't know how the players would take that, or I don't know how somebody in the organization would take your manager saying that, because it sounded, or it came across as it's going to be like this for quite some time. Like, he didn't finish it off as we're almost there, like in a couple of weeks, or, like once this Christmas season is over, like, you kind of like sometimes get the manager saying, oh, see us after the 10th week is the beginning of the season or whatever, like kind of like punt it away, as we would say in American football. And then, live to see another day and set a goal whereby then the team is going to be. When your manager comes out and says that stuff, as true as it is, and this is what we do, right? When they say the truth serum, when they give it to you, we don't like it, or fans don't like it because it's too real. But then when they give the company line or just the standard answer, we're like, they're not being honest. But I get it. I took it as, I'm like, that's honest and he's right. But I don't know how you can say that and then still be respected in the locker room. You can tell. You can tell it's a very, very frustrated squad. You see the end of these games, the fights that the players get into. You can tell everybody is frustrated with it. And sometimes I like Gary O'Neill, but sometimes you just need a new voice to come in and kind of calm things down and say, hey, it's not as bad as you guys think, and then move from there.
Yeah, I think if they had gotten a draw in that match and the game ends 1-1, I don't think we would have seen the crazy scenes at the end of the match that we saw with the players having to escort each other off the pitch. I mean, guy got a red card after the final minute. Like, I don't even know how it happens. Guy got sent off during stoppage time. He also made a comment about the actual work that was being done on that final corner where the goal is scored. And he basically tells flat out, like, I don't know what to tell you. Two players just completely decide to switch positions, go to different areas that we worked on all week long in the biggest moment. And he even said, he goes, this happens sometimes during matches, but it doesn't happen in stoppage time when you're hanging on in a 1-1 draw in a match you need. And he's like, I can't tell you that they don't score the goal, but I'm confident if those two players are in the positions they're supposed to be on the pitch, we deal with that header, we clear it out, and the game ends in a draw. at some point the players have to do the job they're asked to on the pitch. Craig Dawson after the match said that was absolutely the case. That basically, he actually said 3 players, and I'm pretty sure he was talking about Ryan Aitonori, who was supposed to be the one on the back post, who decided to just go cover the front post and leave the back post completely wide open at the end of the game and then lose his ever bleeping mind. Do you think that is just frustration of a bunch of guys who know it's not going right? They don't have that, they know they don't have the answers within that side to get out of this problem? Or do you think it is just poor leadership, poor man management? Because to me, one thing Gary O'Neill teams usually look like, whether it was back at Bournemouth or when he was in the championship, they're usually very well drilled, well coached sides, which I guess that's why this is so shocking to me.
I think it's a matter of just, I mean, that's more on the players than the coaching, I think, when it happens in an isolated incident. If it happens over and over again, then you're like, hey, this is a coaching issue. But I think when it happens is more on the players. And yeah, that's an accumulation of frustration. You know what you need to do. You can be drilled and you know exactly what you have to do. But sometimes, I mean, we're all human. People react in different ways when a couple of the things change. They probably went out to that game thinking we have to win this. This is the game that we have to win. And maybe they felt during the game, like after they tied it up, you know, it might happen and stuff like that, right? But I think, like I say, when you're frustrated and your mind goes all over the place, it's easier to make mistakes. I remember we had decided to talk about my retail days, but we had like a warehouse outside. And, you know, you go over with your assistants, all that kind of stuff. You know exactly what needs to be done. But when that freaking fire alarm is going because of pipe froze outside, and he's like, I turned the valve. I'm like, why would you turn the valve on and put water in the freezing, it's like -10, middle of winter in Chicago, and flood the entire lines and stuff? It's just panic, right? Like, you don't know. It's just frustration, panic. You don't know what's going on. I just feel like it's one of those. Like, they felt like they had to win that game. You felt it at the end of the last game too. The heads just go. And man, like, this is a sports, this is the peak level over here. All you need is to be 10% off, 15% off to make that mistake. It doesn't take a whole lot. And I think that's what happens. I mean, you can clearly tell people are not where they're supposed to be. Or you can just, you know, when we look at it, we're like, it's poor defending. You watch it again, you're like, that makes no sense. Like, in terms of how they were lined up and stuff. And then he talks about it. I just take that as frustration, and that's why you can't change the players, unfortunately, and make people unfrustrated. So what you do is you change the voice. Like I say, they probably need somebody to come in and calm the troops and say, it's not as bad as you guys think. All we have to do this, and we're in good shape. It's hard for Gary O'Neill to say that when he goes out last week and says, well, what are you going to do? We sold guys, never replace them. We're trying to work on it, blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, it's a lot easier for a new voice to do that. Probably unfair to Gary, but this is how this shit rolls, really.
So speaking of the new voice, there's rumors that Vitor Pereira, the Portuguese coach, is basically in line to come in. You know, we'll go real quick on this one. I'll just ask you, because I know you have experience with him as manager at Fenerbahce, and you did enjoy his time there. And I know you never get too much time with a manager at Fenerbahce. So no. you had to enjoy it while you had him, because you could have 3 of them in the next month. But do you see, from your experience and what you've watched, does this man have the mettle to come in on December 16th? Supplant it deep in a relegation zone inside of the Premier League and find a way out? Or could this be a hire with an eye that if we go down, this is a guy who might be able to get us back up?
I would probably hope, I mean, for the Wolves' sake, it's the latter, because I liked him. He is actually, I think he used to work with Mourinho back in the day, in his earlier days. So he is Mourinho Jr. The difference is, especially when you're dealing with the Turkish media and stuff like that, Mourinho can come out and say stuff over there. I mean, it's the same thing with British media. You know, you can say stuff there when you won. You can say respect, respect, and walk out the room. But you can't do that when we're Vitor and you haven't won anything, and you're like, right, traveling the world to Korea and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and stuff like that. So that was the main difference. But he is very good at taking some players and like Ferdi, who's in Brighton now. He used to be a winger before Vitor came over there. Osai Samuel, who came from Queen's Park Rangers, used to be a winger. He made him like a wing back. He made him a right back. I mean, he literally made Ferdi to the player he is now. I mentioned this Kim, who's at center back in Bayern now. Went over there from Fenerbahce. He's the one who brought him over from Korea. Nobody knew anything about him. He brought him over to Fenerbahce.
Before he went to Napoli and then got his move to Bayern, right?
Fenerbahce sold him to Napoli for a bunch of money, and then Napoli took that, doubled it up, and sent him to Bayern afterwards. So he's a good guy in terms of, getting the most out of guys. So maybe Wolves likes that and feels like they have some good parts just not being used correctly. The only thing is, this is the Premier League, and you're coming in the middle of the season. I don't know if he's going to be able to say that. So I would guess, to answer your question, more is the latter. So even if he can't turn it around, we can have him keep the keys next season in the championship, and he will bring him back up.
Does it matter at all that Southampton made a move, or is this just appeasing the fans to say, we're not going to make you watch Russell Martin manage this team midweek against Liverpool in the League Cup quarterfinals because we were down 5-0 to a Premier League side and we just can't compete? I mean,
the game was over. I thought he started early when I saw the score, by the way. Like, I looked at the score and I was like, oh, I thought they were at the same time. I'm like, oh shit, they are at the same time. That escalated quickly. I don't know. This is probably something they should have done a month ago, or this is a conversation that should have been had a month ago. We joked, on the podcast and stuff like that. Russell Martin wants to be the next Vincent Kompany and go to another like top club in the world after like falling on his face after bringing the team from Championship, playing the same style and stuff. But I mean, everybody knew it. Everybody could see it. Why wait until now where you're almost becoming a hopeless case, right? I mean, they're 6 points off the bottom, safety. I think maybe it's not the end of the world, but I mean, how many points have you gotten that you got to catch up 6 points now? So I think it's a little bit late, but we'd rather do it now than later. I think if you're Southampton, because at least you're giving yours a chance. Clearly, this guy says, this is the way I play and there's nothing else. And anybody in their right mind could have told you over the last month and a half, this is not the way. Like Mandalorian, this is the way. Like, this is not the way. So it's like, why would you keep? I understand you have like a philosophy, blah, 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 but you got to, sprinkle some realism in that and know what you're working with and know when to enforce that philosophy and when to play to get that. When you brought up that picture earlier, that's one thing about Shandush, as I like to call him, is that he knows, like, ugly or not, this is what gets a point. So I don't care how ugly it is, we're going to get the point. And that's how Everton has survived. Because
saw it on display at the Emirates this weekend when they just absolutely mucked up a game against a quality side like Arsenal. And to be honest, in some ways, Everton actually had the better chances overall in the match. And you would have thought the set pieces would come to Arsenal's way, yet Everton did what they had to do, which was defend all those set pieces and dare them to try to score from open play. Yeah. And they just couldn't happen. They couldn't make it happen. So real quick, if you were Southampton, would you consider either of the recently fired managers? Like, would you consider Gary O'Neill an answer? Would you consider Steve Cooper an answer? Because they both have experience in the Premier League, like real experience in the Premier League, both success and failures. Like, would you give one of them a shot, or would you be looking for a fire sale manager? I've heard nothing about what Southampton could be thinking about doing. And for all I know, they appointed someone already. I think they said the youth manager is going to take charge on Wednesday.
Oh, like in there kind of thing.
What would you be doing if you were Southampton?
I know I'm against the retreads, like American NBA style, the same guys just rotating around the league kind of a thing. I would rather a club in that situation. Wolves a little bit different, right? Their situation is a bit better, obviously, than Southampton. I would try to go what you were saying with Vitor earlier. Like, get a guy who might be able to do it, but if he can't, you don't have to look for a new guy next year. If you bring Cooper, If he can't do it, you get relegated. Do you want to stick with Cooper still, or are you going to bring somebody?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I would, if I'm an owner, that's what I would do. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but I would try to think more long term. Long term in soccer is like a year and a half. So like I would think long term as opposed to just getting a guy that's like Sam or Big Sam or somebody like that just to save you for like 3 months kind of a deal. Because you have time if you bring the right guy. Yeah, I mean, you said match week 16, so you have a lot of time. We're not even halfway there yet.
So